The white silk of her ruined wedding dress caught in the car door as Lydia Johnson threw herself into the back seat, gasping for breath like she'd been drowning. "Drive. Please, just drive." The driver said nothing, but the car pulled smoothly away from the curb before she'd even closed the door properly. Lydia yanked the fabric free and slammed it shut, her hands shaking so violently she could barely manage the latch. Through the rear window, she could see the church steps receding, the cluster of shocked faces growing smaller, her mother's mouth still open in a perfect O of horror. She couldn't see Marcus anymore. Good. She never wanted to see Marcus again. "Where to?" The driver's voice was cultured, accented in a way she couldn't quite place. British maybe, but older somehow, richer. Lydia pressed her palms against her eyes, smearing what was left of her carefully applied makeup. "Anywhere. I don't care. Just not here." Very well. She should have been more specific. She should have given an address, asked to go to her apartment or her best friend's place, or literally anywhere concrete. But thinking required energy she didn't have, not after what had just happened. Not after standing at that altar, bouquet trembling in her hands, watching Marcus lean down to kiss her and catching the unmistakable scent of perfume that wasn't hers on his collar. Not after pulling back and asking him point blank, in front of 300 guests, whether he'd slept with her cousin the night before their wedding. Not after he'd hesitated just long enough for her to know the answer. The car smelled like leather, and something else, something she couldn't identify. Not cologne exactly. Something darker, spicier, old paper maybe, expensive wine. She finally looked up, blinking tears from her eyes, and studied the driver in the rearview mirror. She could only see his eyes from this angle, but they were remarkable. Pale as winter ice, almost colorless in the dim interior of the car. His hair was white, she noticed, or perhaps platinum blonde, swept back from his face in a way that seemed deliberately styled, yet effortlessly perfect. "I don't have any money," she said suddenly, reality crashing back in. "I mean, I have my phone, but my wallet's back at the church, in my bag. Which I left, obviously." She gestured helplessly at her dress, at the complete absence of pockets or any practical storage. "I can transfer you money once we get somewhere with Wi-Fi, or I can give you my address and you can—" "That won't be necessary. I'm not going to just stiff you for the fare. I'm having the worst day of my life, but I'm not a thief." Those pale eyes met hers in the mirror, and something about his gaze made her breath catch. "Consider it a wedding gift." "There is no wedding." The words came out harder than she'd intended, sharp enough to cut. "There is no marriage. There is no happily ever after. There's just me in this ridiculous dress that cost $6,000 and makes me look like a deranged cupcake." "You look lovely," Lydia laughed, the sound bitter and too high. "You're a terrible liar." "I never lie." Something about the way he said it made her believe him. She settled back against the seat, watching the city slide past outside the window. They were heading away from downtown, toward the older neighborhoods where renovated brownstones stood shoulder to shoulder with buildings that hadn't been updated since the 1920s. The sun was starting to set, painting everything in shades of amber and gold that seemed too beautiful for how she felt inside. "What's your name?" she asked. A pause, long enough that she thought he might not answer. Castellan Draconis." "That's very, dramatic." "My parents had a flair for the theatrical. Mine named me after a Jane Austen character and expected me to be sensible and proper for my entire life." Lydia pulled at the layers of tulle in her lap, watching them spring back into place no matter how she crushed them. "I think I disappointed them." "By running out on your wedding?" "By agreeing to it in the first place." The admission surprised her. She hadn't meant to say that out loud. "Marcus wasn't a bad guy. He had a good job. He was attractive. Our families approved. Everyone said we were perfect together. I kept waiting to feel something. Anything more than just comfortable. And then today I found out he'd been feeling plenty with my cousin, so I guess the problem wasn't his capacity for passion after all." Castellan made a sound that might have been sympathy or might have been something else entirely. "Love is rarely convenient." "Have you ever been married?" "Once. A very long time ago." "What happened?" "She died." The flatness in his voice made Lydia wish she'd kept her mouth shut. "I'm sorry. It was centuries ago. She blinked. You mean it feels like centuries ago, because of grief? He didn't correct her, but something about his silence felt deliberate. The car turned down a street Lydia didn't recognize, narrow and cobblestoned, lined with iron fences and gas lamps that had been converted to electricity, but still maintained their antique charm. The buildings here were older, grander, the kind of architecture that spoke of old money and older secrets. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere safe, somewhere you can rest and decide what comes next. I don't know you. This is actually a terrible idea. For all I know, you're a serial killer who preys on runaway brides. For all you know, Castellan agreed mildly. Lydia looked down at her phone. 317 missed calls, 289 text messages. She turned it off without reading any of them. If you murder me, at least I won't have to deal with the aftermath of today. I'm not going to murder you. Promise? On my honor. The car pulled up in front of a building that looked like it had been transplanted directly from Gothic Revival England. 4 stories of dark stone, pointed arch windows, a heavy wooden door bound with iron. It should have looked out of place among the other historic buildings, but instead it seemed to anchor them, as though the entire street had arranged itself around this single, imposing structure. This is where you live? Lydia asked. Yes? It's very, you know what, never mind. I'm past the point of making judgments about anything today. Castellan opened her door from the outside, moving so quickly and quietly that she hadn't even seen him exit the driver's seat. Up close, she could see him properly for the first time, and her breath caught. He was tall, well over 6 feet, dressed in a black suit that looked hand-tailored and probably cost more than her car. His hair was indeed white, not blonde, falling in perfect waves to his shoulders. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his features were arranged in such precise, aristocratic lines that he barely looked real. He was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen, and something about him terrified her on an instinctive level she couldn't name. I should go, she said, not moving. You turned off your phone. You have no money. You're wearing a wedding dress in a city that won't be kind to a woman alone after dark. Castellan extended his hand. Come inside. I have guest rooms. You can rest, clean up, borrow clothes. When you're ready, I'll take you wherever you want to go. Why are you helping me? His pale eyes held hers, and she saw something flicker in their depths, something lonely, something ancient. Because I know what it's like to run from a life that doesn't fit anymore. Lydia looked at his offered hand for a long moment. Everything about this was a bad idea. Everything about this screamed danger. But she'd spent 26 years making good decisions, safe decisions, and where had it gotten her? Standing at an altar next to a man who'd betrayed her with her own family. She took his hand. His skin was cool against hers, his grip gentle but unmistakably strong. He helped her out of the car and up the steps to that imposing door, which swung open at his touch without any visible lock or key. Inside, the building was even more impressive than the exterior had promised. The entry hall stretched upward 3 stories, all dark wood paneling and crystal chandeliers. A grand staircase curved along one wall, its banister carved with intricate designs that might have been flowers or might have been something else, something older than decorative roses. This isn't a house, Lydia said slowly. This is a mansion. This is a museum. This is home, Castellan finished. At least one of several. You have several mansions? Several residences. What do you do? Investment banking? Tech startup? Did you invent something that everyone uses but nobody knows about? A slight smile touched his lips, the first real expression she'd seen from him. I'm independently wealthy. Old money, as they say. How old? Older than you'd believe. A woman appeared at the top of the stairs, and Lydia nearly jumped out of her skin. She hadn't heard any footsteps, any doors opening. The woman was simply there, as though she'd materialized from the shadows themselves. She was dressed in a severe black dress that might have been a uniform, her own hair white, her skin the same translucent pale as Castellan's. Master, the woman said, inclining her head, you didn't mention you'd be bringing a guest. I didn't know myself until recently. Lydia, this is Serafina. She manages the household. Serafina, this is Lydia Johnson. She'll be staying in the Rose Room. Please prepare it and find her something comfortable to wear. Serafina's gaze traveled over Lydia's wedding dress, and something like sympathy flickered across her austere features. "Of course. Miss Johnson, if you'll follow me." Lydia looked at Castellan, suddenly uncertain. He gave her a small nod. "You're safe here, I give you my word." That word again. Honor, word, as though such things were binding contracts and not just polite phrases. But Lydia followed Serafina up the stairs, her train trailing behind her like a ghost of the life she'd just abandoned. The rose room turned out to be larger than her entire apartment, decorated in shades of deep crimson and gold that should have been overwhelming but somehow felt warm and safe instead. The bed was a four-poster monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a castle, and the bathroom featured a clawfoot tub large enough to swim in. "I'll bring you clothing shortly," Serafina said. "Would you like assistance with your dress?" Lydia looked down at the complicated lacing and buttons running down her spine. "That would be amazing, actually. Thank you." Serafina's nimble fingers made quick work of the fastenings, and within minutes, Lydia was standing in nothing but her strapless bra and underwear, feeling more exposed than she had in years. The housekeeper draped the dress carefully over a chair, smoothing out the wrinkles with a practiced hand. "For what it's worth," Serafina said quietly. "The master doesn't usually help people. He keeps to himself. If he brought you here, it means something. It means I flagged down his car while having a breakdown." "Perhaps." Serafina moved toward the door, her movements fluid and eerily quiet. "Or perhaps it means you were meant to find each other today." Then she was gone, and Lydia was alone in a stranger's mansion, wearing nothing but her undergarments and the last shreds of her dignity. She should have been frightened. She should have been calling someone, anyone, demanding they come get her. Instead, she walked into that enormous bathroom, started filling the tub with water hot enough to scald, and burst into tears for the first time since leaving the church. She cried for the wedding that hadn't happened, for the relationship that had been a lie, for the time she'd wasted trying to force herself into a shape that would make everyone else happy, for the fact that she'd known somewhere deep down that Marcus wasn't right for her, and she'd almost married him anyway out of sheer momentum and social pressure. By the time she climbed into the tub, she felt hollow and clean in a way that had nothing to do with physical cleanliness. The water swallowed her up to her neck, wonderfully hot, smelling faintly of roses from the bath salts someone had left on the edge. She let her head fall back against the porcelain and closed her eyes. A knock on the bedroom door made her jump. Just a moment. She climbed out, wrapped herself in the plush robe hanging on a hook, and padded back into the bedroom. A neat stack of clothing had been left on the bed. Soft black pants that looked like they might actually fit her, a deep green sweater, fresh undergarments still in their packaging, and a pair of slippers. Everything was her size. Everything was perfect. How had Serafina known her measurements? Another question to add to the growing list of questions about this place, about Castellan, about everything that had happened since she'd thrown herself into that car. Lydia dressed slowly, grateful for clothes that didn't weigh 40 pounds and require structural engineering to wear. Her hair was a disaster, mascara streaked and half-fallen from its elaborate updo. She pulled out all the pins, letting it fall loose around her shoulders, and did her best to wipe away the evidence of her crying jag. Her eyes were still puffy, her face still blotchy, but at least she looked human again. Approximately. Another knock. "Come in." Serafina entered carrying a tray laden with food. Soup that smelled like heaven, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and a pot of tea. "The master thought you might be hungry." The master. Lydia accepted the tray, setting it on her lap as she curled up on the bed. "Is that really what you call him?" "It's what he is. Master of this house and much more besides." "You're being very cryptic." "Am I?" Serafina's expression was unreadable. "Eat. Rest. The master will check on you later if you're amenable. I should probably talk to him, thank him, figure out what I'm doing next. Tomorrow is soon enough for planning. Tonight you've been through enough." She left before Lydia could respond, and suddenly Lydia was alone with the best soup she'd ever tasted and a head full of questions she was too exhausted to pursue. She ate mechanically, her body grateful for the fuel, even if her emotions were still too raw to register much of anything. When the tray was empty, she set it aside and burrowed under the covers, expecting to lie awake for hours, replaying the day's disasters. Instead, she fell asleep almost immediately, dragged down into darkness so complete and peaceful it felt like a gift. She woke to moonlight streaming through the window and a figure sitting in the chair beside her bed. Lydia should have screamed, should have bolted for the door or grabbed something to use as a weapon. Instead, she pushed herself up on her elbows and said, "You're watching me sleep. That's creepy." "I apologize." Castellan didn't move from his position, one leg crossed over the other, hands resting loosely on the arms of the chair. In the silvery light, he looked even less human than before, all sharp angles and ethereal beauty. "I wanted to ensure you were well. You seemed fragile earlier." "I'm not fragile. I'm angry." "Anger is healthier than despair." "Are you a therapist on top of being a mysterious mansion owner?" "I'm simply old enough to have seen many people process many griefs." Lydia sat up fully, pulling the covers around her shoulders. "Serafina said you don't usually help people." "Serafina talks too much." "Does she?" "Because I feel like everyone in this house talks just enough to be mysterious and not enough to actually explain anything." Lydia studied him in the moonlight. "Why did you pick me up today? And don't say it's because I needed help. There are 1,000 people in this city who need help at any given moment." Castellan was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it before. "You stood outside that church in your wedding dress, looking like your entire world had ended, and you held your head up anyway. You didn't collapse, you didn't fall apart, you decided to run. There's a strength in that, a fire." He paused. "I remembered what that felt like, making the choice to walk away from everything familiar, even when it terrifies you." "When did you do that?" "A very long time ago." "You keep saying that. A long time ago, centuries ago, as though you're—" Lydia stopped, looked at him, really looked at him. The impossible beauty, the white hair and colorless eyes, the skin so pale it seemed to glow in the moonlight, the way he and Serafina moved without sound, the mansion that felt like it existed outside of normal time. "As though you're not human." Castellan's expression didn't change, but she felt the quality of his attention sharpen. "That's a dangerous guess." "Is it a wrong one?" No. The single word hung between them. Lydia should have been afraid, should have been scrambling for the door, running into the night, calling for help. Instead, she felt a strange calm settle over her, as though some part of her had known all along and was simply relieved to have it confirmed. "What are you?" she asked. "You already know." "I want to hear you say it." Castellan stood in one fluid motion, moving to the window where he was backlit by the moon. "I'm vampire, king of the North American territory, lord of 17 houses, and the oldest of my kind, still walking this earth." "Vampire," Lydia tested the word. "As in, drinks blood, lives forever, can't go out in sunlight?" "The sunlight part is true enough, though it won't kill me, only weaken me considerably. The blood is necessary. The immortality is both blessing and curse, depending on the century." "You're a vampire king." "Yes. And you just happened to pick me up outside a church. Nothing about today was happenstance." Castellan turned to face her, and his eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. "I was driving through that neighborhood because I'd heard rumors of a new vampire clan moving into the territory without permission. I was on my way to address the situation when I saw you. And He paused. "I forgot about everything else. I saw you standing there, drowning in white silk and despair, and I needed to help you, needed it in a way I haven't needed anything in decades." Lydia's heart was hammering, but not entirely from fear. "Why?" "I don't know. That's not a very kingly answer. Perhaps I've been a king too long." He moved closer, stopping a careful distance from the bed. "You should be afraid of me." "Probably. You should demand I take you home immediately." "Where's home? The apartment I shared with Marcus? My parents' house where they're probably waiting to lecture me about embarrassing the family? My cousin's place where I'd have to look at the woman who slept with my fiancé?" Lydia shook her head. "I don't have a home right now. I just have right now. And right now you're in a mansion with a vampire who could kill you without trying. But you won't." "How do you know?" Because if you wanted to hurt me, you would have done it already. Because you gave me your word I'd be safe, and you meant it. I don't know how I know that, but I do. Lydia pulled her knees up to her chest. Tell me about vampires, the real version, not the movie version. Castellan returned to his chair, settling back into it with that preternatural grace. We're stronger and faster than humans. We heal quickly from most injuries. We require blood to survive, but we don't need to kill for it. Most of us have arrangements with blood banks or willing donors. We can eat human food, though it provides no real sustenance. Sunlight weakens us severely, makes us vulnerable, so we conduct our business at night. We can't turn into bats or mist. We do have reflections, and religious symbols hold no power over us. Can you read minds? No. That's disappointing. Is it? I feel like mind reading would be a useful skill in vampire politics. A slight smile touched his lips again. Vampire politics rely more on threats, manipulation, and occasionally strategic murder. Lovely. You asked for the real version. Fair point. Lydia hugged her knees tighter. Why are you king? Is it like human royalty? Hereditary? It's based on age and power. The oldest and strongest vampire in a territory leads it, challenges notwithstanding. I've held this territory for 300 years. How old are you? 743 years. The number was so large it barely computed. Lydia tried to imagine living for over 7 centuries, watching the world change and change again, everyone you'd ever known turning to dust. Don't you get lonely? Something in his expression cracked, just for a moment. Every single day. The raw honesty in those words made her chest ache. Is that why you helped me? Because I looked lonely too? Perhaps. Castellan leaned forward, his pale eyes intense. Or perhaps because in all my centuries, I've never seen anyone burn as brightly as you did standing in front of that church, choosing yourself over everyone else's expectations. Heat crept up Lydia's neck. I wasn't burning. I was falling apart. The two often looked the same from the outside. They sat in silence for a moment, and Lydia found herself studying him again. The elegant lines of his face, the way the moonlight seemed to love him, making him look like something carved from marble in moonbeams. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, and dangerous in a way that should have sent her running. Instead, she felt safer than she had in months. What happens now? She asked. That depends on what you want. I want to not think about my life for a while. I want to exist in a space where none of today happened and I can just be. She looked at him. Can I stay here? Just for a little while. You can stay as long as you want. I'll need to go back to my apartment eventually, get my things, deal with the fallout. When you're ready, I'll take you, or Serafina can arrange for your belongings to be packed and brought here. You'd do that? I'd do a great many things for you, Lydia Johnson. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. You need only ask. She should have questioned that, should have demanded to know why a vampire king would make such an offer to a random human he'd picked up on the street. But exhaustion was pulling at her again, and the moonlight was so pretty, and Castellan looked so tragically beautiful sitting there in his chair like a lonely prince from a fairy tale. Will you stay? She asked. Just until I fall asleep again? Yes. Promise you're not going to drink my blood while I'm unconscious? On my honor. Lydia smiled despite everything. Your honor seems very important to you. It's all I have left from my human life. Everything else has faded or been discarded, but honor remains. She wanted to ask him more, to hear the story of his human life, his transformation, the 700 years that had brought him to that street at that exact moment. But sleep was dragging her down again, and questions could wait for tomorrow. Good night, Castellan, she murmured, letting her eyes drift shut. Good night, Lydia. Sleep well. His voice followed her down into darkness, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lydia felt protected, cherished, safe in a way that had nothing to do with locked doors and everything to do with the ancient creature watching over her in the moonlight. When she woke again, it was to sunlight streaming through the window and Castellan's chair sitting empty. Lydia stretched, feeling more rested than she'd been in months. It took her a moment to remember where she was, why she was wearing borrowed clothes in a mansion that belonged to a vampire king. When the memories crashed back in, she braced herself for the accompanying wave of grief and humiliation. It didn't come. Or rather, it came muted, softened by distance and sleep and the strange unreality of her current situation. She'd left Marcus at the altar. She'd run from her own wedding. Her life as she'd known it was over. And somehow, that felt like a beginning rather than an ending. A note had been left on the bedside table in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting. "Good morning. Come downstairs when you're ready. We have much to discuss." Lydia washed her face, did her best to tame her hair, and ventured out into the hallway. In daylight, the mansion was even more impressive. Paintings lined the walls, genuine oils that looked centuries old. Sculptures stood on pedestals in alcoves. The floor was polished hardwood that gleamed like honey, and everything smelled faintly of old books and beeswax. She found the stairs easily enough and descended to the main floor, following the sound of voices to what turned out to be a dining room dominated by a table that could have seated 30 people. Castellan sat at the head of it, and even in daylight, filtered through heavy curtains, he looked ethereal and strange. He'd changed clothes, now wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and somehow the casual attire made him seem more dangerous rather than less. Serafina stood nearby, along with 2 other people Lydia didn't recognize. Both had the same white hair and pale skin, the same unearthly beauty. More vampires, she realized. "Good morning," Castellan said, rising when he saw her. The others rose as well, and Lydia felt absurdly underdressed in her borrowed clothes. "Did you sleep well?" "Surprisingly, yes. Is it weird that I slept better in a stranger's house than I have in months in my own bed?" "Not weird at all. Sometimes distance provides clarity." He gestured to the others. "Lydia, these are members of my court. Serafina you've met. This is Theron, my chief advisor, and Isolde, who manages security and intelligence." Theron was tall and severe-looking, with eyes that might have been gray or might have been silver. Isolde was smaller, almost delicate, with a smile that somehow made her look more dangerous than comforting. "A pleasure," Theron said, inclining his head. "We've heard so much about you," Isolde added, and there was something knowing in her tone that made Lydia blush. "I doubt that, considering I only arrived last night." "News travels quickly in vampire circles." Isolde's smile widened, "especially when our king brings home a human bride." "I'm not a bride. I'm a runaway almost bride. There's a distinction." "Is there?" Isolde looked amused. "You're wearing white silk in the king's protection. Sounds bridal to me." "Isolde?" Castellan's voice was soft but carried an unmistakable command. "Leave her be." "Yes, my lord." Isolde didn't sound particularly chastened. Lydia looked at Castellan. "You said we have much to discuss?" "Yes, please sit. Have you eaten?" "I'm not really hungry." "You need to eat regardless." Serafina was already placing food on the table, appearing and disappearing so quickly it made Lydia dizzy. Coffee, toast, eggs, fruit. Human bodies require regular fuel. "Thank you." Lydia sat, acutely aware of 4 pairs of vampire eyes watching her. She forced herself to take a bite of toast, chew, swallow. "So, discussion time. What's going on?" Castellan exchanged glances with Theron before speaking. "I mentioned last night that I was investigating a new vampire clan in my territory. They've been causing problems, feeding without permission, turning humans without oversight, generally destabilizing the careful balance we've maintained." "Sounds bad." "It is. This morning they sent me a message." His jaw tightened. "They know about you." Lydia set down her toast. "How?" "We have a theory that someone in my organization is feeding them information," Theron said. "It's the only explanation for how quickly they learned of your presence here." "But I'm nobody. I'm just a random human who needed a ride." "You're under the king's protection," Isolde corrected. "That makes you a target. It makes you leverage." Fear curled in Lydia's stomach. "Are you saying I'm in danger because I stayed here?" "You're in danger because I brought you here," Castellan said flatly. "This is my fault. I should have considered the political implications before acting on impulse." "So what do we do?" "We keep you safe," he said immediately. "You stay here, in this house where I can personally ensure your protection. Theron and Isolde will investigate the security breach and deal with the rival clan. Once the situation is resolved, you'll be free to return to your life. And if I don't want to return to my life? The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise everyone else. Castellan leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean my life before yesterday was empty. I was going through the motions, trying to be what everyone expected. I was going to marry a man I didn't love because it seemed like the logical next step. That's not a life worth rushing back to. Lydia met his eyes. Whatever this is, whatever's happening here, it's the most real I've felt in years, even with the danger. Maybe especially because of the danger. You're processing trauma, Theron said carefully. The wedding, the betrayal. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe, or maybe I'm thinking clearly for the first time in my life. Castellan was studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You understand what you're saying? If you stay here, even temporarily, you're entering my world. Vampire politics, vampire rules, vampire danger. It's not romantic or exciting. It's cutthroat and occasionally brutal. Sounds better than wedding planning and pretending to care about napkin colors. Isolde laughed outright at that. I like her. This isn't a joke, Theron said sharply. If the rival clan thinks she's important to you, my lord, they will try to use her. They will hurt her to hurt you. Then we ensure they never get close enough to try. Castellan's voice had gone cold, taking on an edge of command that made everyone straighten. Double the guard on the house. No one enters or leaves without my explicit permission. Isolde, I want to know everything about this new clan by nightfall. Names, locations, weaknesses. Theron, find the leak in our organization and deal with it. And what will you do? Lydia asked. His pale eyes found hers. I'll keep you safe, whatever it takes. The weight of that promise settled over her like a cloak. Lydia knew she should be rational, should thank him politely and ask to be taken somewhere neutral until this blew over. Instead, she said, Then I'm staying. Lydia, I'm staying, she repeated firmly. I'm already involved. Running away won't change that. At least here I'll know what's happening. Castellan looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded. Very well. But you follow the rules. You don't leave the house without my permission. You don't open doors or windows. You don't invite anyone in. And if I tell you to do something, you do it immediately without question. Understood? Understood. Good. He stood, and the others rose with him. Theron, Isolde, you have your assignments. Serafina, ensure Lydia has everything she needs. I have business to attend to before sunset. He left without another word, moving with that inhuman speed that made him seem to simply vanish between one blink and the next. Theron and Isolde followed, leaving Lydia alone with Serafina and a plate of cooling eggs. You handled that well, Serafina said, beginning to clear the table. Did I? I feel like I just volunteered to be bait in a vampire power struggle. Perhaps. Or perhaps you're exactly what the master needs right now. What does that mean? Serafina paused, a stack of plates in her hands. He's been alone a long time, Miss Lydia. Lonely in a way that has nothing to do with company and everything to do with connection. In 7 centuries, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He doesn't know me, doesn't he? Serafina's smile was enigmatic. Come, let me show you the library. If you're going to be staying with us, you should understand more about our world. The library turned out to be a 2-story affair with floor-to-ceiling shelves, rolling ladders, and the kind of comfortable reading chairs that demanded you curl up with tea and lose yourself for hours. Serafina guided Lydia to a specific section, pulling down several leather-bound volumes. The history of vampires, she said, setting the books on a reading table. Our origins, our laws, our structure. This will help you understand what you've walked into. Lydia opened the first book, squinting at handwritten text in a language she didn't recognize. I can't read this. Try the second one. It's more recent, only a few centuries old, written in English. The second book was more accessible, and Lydia found herself drawn into the strange, violent, oddly romantic history of vampire kind. They were created, according to the text, by ancient magic gone wrong. A group of nobles seeking immortality had performed a ritual that transformed them into something between human and monster. They'd spread across the world, creating more of their kind, establishing territories and rules to prevent all-out war between clans. The hierarchy was strict. Kings ruled territories, with courts of advisors and warriors beneath them. Humans who knew about vampires were either protected as allies or eliminated as threats. Rogue vampires who broke the laws were hunted down and executed. It was brutal and efficient, a shadow government existing alongside human society, and Castellan was at the top of it all, at least in North America. The most powerful vampire on the continent, respected and feared in equal measure. "Why doesn't he have a queen?" Lydia asked, looking up from the book. Serafina, who'd been dusting shelves nearby, went very still. "He did once, centuries ago. He said she died. She was killed, murdered by a rival clan as retaliation for a slight he'd delivered to their king." Serafina's expression was sorrowful. He loved her deeply. When she died, something in him died as well. He's been alone ever since, devoted to duty, but not to any person. That's heartbreaking. It is, but perhaps now, Serafina trailed off meaningfully. I'm not his dead wife reborn or whatever. I'm just a random human who crashed into his life at the wrong moment. Are you? The master doesn't believe in coincidence, neither do I. Before Lydia could respond, a loud crash echoed through the house, followed by shouting. Serafina moved instantly, positioning herself between Lydia and the library door. "Stay behind me." "What's happening?" "Someone's breached the house." Terror spiked through Lydia's chest. "But it's daytime. You said vampires can't function well in daylight. Not that they can't function at all, especially if they're desperate or stupid." Serafina's hands had curled into claws, her teeth elongating into fangs. For the first time, Lydia saw her not as a prim housekeeper, but as the predator she truly was. "We need to get you to the safe room." More crashing, closer now. Serafina grabbed Lydia's wrist and pulled her toward a bookshelf on the far wall, pressing a hidden button that made the entire thing swing open. Behind it was a small room, windowless, with stone walls and a heavy door. Inside. "Lock it from the inside. Don't open it for anyone except me or the master." "What about you?" "I'm going to hold them off until reinforcements arrive." Serafina shoved her gently but firmly into the room. "Go." The bookshelf swung shut, plunging Lydia into darkness. She felt along the wall until she found the lock, a heavy bolt that slid into place with a solid thunk. Then she was alone in the dark, heart hammering, listening to the sounds of violence filtering through the stone. Screaming, breaking glass, inhuman roars that made her blood run cold. How many vampires had broken in? How had they gotten past whatever security Castellan had in place? Time became elastic in the darkness. Seconds felt like hours. Lydia pressed her hands over her ears, trying to block out the sounds, and found herself praying to gods she wasn't sure she believed in. "Don't let Serafina die. Don't let this be my fault. Please let Castellan come home in time." Suddenly, the noise stopped. The murr. Lydia held her breath, straining to hear anything. Footsteps approached the bookshelf, deliberate and slow. A voice, male and unfamiliar, said, "I can hear your heartbeat, little human, pounding away like a drum. Come out and I'll make this quick." She didn't move, didn't breathe. "No? Pity. Looks like we'll have to do this the hard way." Something slammed into the bookshelf from the other side, hard enough to make the entire wall shudder. Lydia stumbled backward, her shoulders hitting the far wall of the tiny room. Another impact, and she heard wood beginning to splinter. This was it. This was how she died, not at her wedding, but the day after, killed by vampires in a secret room in a mansion that didn't belong to her. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. The third impact tore the bookshelf off its hinges. Moonlight spilled into the safe room, except it wasn't moonlight because it was still daytime. The light came from the vampire, standing in the doorway, his skin literally glowing with some kind of power she didn't understand. He was young-looking, maybe 30 in appearance, with the same white hair and pale skin as Castellan, but none of the refinement. He looked feral, his shirt torn and bloody, his eyes wild. "There you are," he said, grinning to show elongated fangs. "The king's new pet. You know how much trouble you've caused." "I didn't cause anything," Lydia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm just a human. You're leverage. You're a message. You're proof that even the mighty Castellan has weaknesses." He stepped into the room, and Lydia had nowhere to go. "Don't worry. I'll make it hurt less than you deserve." He lunged, moving so fast she barely saw him. Lydia threw up her hands instinctively, a useless gesture against a predator that could tear her apart without trying. The vampire never reached her. Castellan appeared between them, moving faster than the other vampire, faster than thought. He caught the attacker by the throat, slamming him backward into the wall with enough force to crack the stone. The vampire gurgled, clawing at Castellan's hands, but he might as well have been trying to bend steel bars. "You entered my home," Castellan said, and his voice was nothing like the cultured, gentle tone Lydia had heard before. This was the voice of a king, of an ancient predator, of something that had survived 7 centuries by being more dangerous than anything else that walked the earth. "You threatened what is mine. Give me one reason I shouldn't rip out your spine and feed it to you." "Orders," the vampire choked out, "just following orders." "Whose orders?" "Lord Malachi. He wanted to send a message. Consider it received." Castellan's hand tightened, and the vampire's eyes went wide with terror. "Tell your lord that if he ever comes near this house, near this territory, near her again, I will wage war unlike anything he's seen in his short, pathetic existence. I will burn his clan to ash and salt the earth where they fell. Do you understand?" "Yes! Yes, I understand!" Castellan released him, letting him drop to the floor in a gasping heap. "Get out! You have 10 seconds before I change my mind." The vampire scrambled to his feet and fled, moving with desperate speed. Castellan watched him go, his shoulders tight with barely restrained violence. Then he turned to Lydia, and his expression softened into something she couldn't quite name. "Are you hurt?" "No. Scared, but not hurt." Lydia stepped out of the safe room on shaking legs. "Serafina. She's alive, injured but healing. She fought well." Castellan moved toward Lydia slowly, as though approaching a frightened animal. "I'm sorry. I should have been here. You came back. That's what matters. I sensed something was wrong, felt it." He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could feel the supernatural chill radiating from his skin. "I've never felt fear like that in centuries, Lydia. The thought of losing you." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Lydia saw it in his eyes, heard it in his voice. This wasn't just about protecting a random human anymore. This was something deeper, something neither of them fully understood yet. "I'm okay," she said softly. "You saved me. This time. But they'll try again. Malachi doesn't make idle threats." Castellan's hands clenched into fists. "I need to end this, need to eliminate the threat permanently." "How?" "By doing what I should have done weeks ago when they first entered my territory. By going to war." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. War meant violence, death, risk. War meant Castellan putting himself in danger to protect her, a human he barely knew. "There has to be another way," Lydia said. "There isn't. Not anymore. They attacked my home. They threatened you. In vampire law, that's grounds for total retaliation." He finally reached out, his cool fingers brushing her cheek with infinite gentleness. "I won't lose you. Not to them, not to anyone." "Castellan. Say it. Tell me to stop, to let you go back to your human life where you'll be safe from all of this. Tell me, and I'll arrange it immediately." Lydia looked up at him, at the ancient, beautiful, terrifying creature who'd saved her twice now. The smart thing would be to run. The sensible thing would be to go back to her apartment, deal with the wreckage of her failed wedding, rebuild her normal life. But nothing about her life had been normal since the moment she'd climbed into his car. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Something blazed in his eyes, fierce and possessive. "You understand what that means? You'll be bound to me, to my protection. You'll be part of vampire politics whether you want to be or not. You'll be a target. I'm already a target. You'll be mine." The way he said it, like an oath and a warning and a prayer all at once, made heat coil in her stomach. "Is that what you want?" "More than I've wanted anything in 200 years. Lydia should have been frightened by the intensity of it, by how fast everything was moving. Instead, she felt alive in a way she'd never experienced before, like she'd spent her entire life sleepwalking and had finally, violently, woken up. "Then I'm yours," she said. Castellan made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a sigh. Then he was kissing her, his cool lips against her warm ones, and it felt like coming home and catching fire all at once. His hand cupped the back of her head, gentle despite his obvious strength. Lydia grabbed his shirt to pull him closer. The kiss deepened, and Lydia tasted something sharp on his lips. Not blood, but power, ancient and intoxicating. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard despite his lack of need for air, Castellan rested his forehead against hers. "I will keep you safe," he murmured. "I will burn down the world to protect you." That seems excessive. That seems appropriate. Lydia laughed despite everything, despite the danger and the fear and the absolute insanity of her current situation. "What happens now? Now I call a court meeting. Now I declare war on Lord Malachi and his clan. Now I make it clear to every vampire in my territory that you are under my personal protection, and harming you means death." He pulled back enough to look at her properly. "And you stay here, safe, while I deal with the threat. I don't like the idea of you going into danger because of me. I've been in danger for 7 centuries. This is nothing new. But, trust me." His pale eyes were intent. "Please, let me do what I do best." Lydia wanted to argue, but the truth was she'd be useless in a vampire war. She was human, fragile, a liability in any actual fight. The best thing she could do was stay out of the way and let Castellan handle it. "Okay," she said, "but you have to promise to come back. On my honor. And you have to tell me more about yourself, about your human life, your transformation, all the things you've seen. If I'm going to be part of your world, I want to understand it." A smile ghosted across his lips. "Agreed. Once this is settled, I'll tell you everything." He kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. Then he was gone, moving too fast for her to track, leaving her alone in the destroyed library with her heart racing and her lips tingling. Serafina appeared a few minutes later, one arm in a makeshift sling, but otherwise appearing recovered. "The master is called a court meeting. Things are about to get very interesting." Is interesting good or bad in vampire terms? Yes. That night, Lydia watched from an upstairs window as dozens of vampires arrived at the mansion. They came in expensive cars, on motorcycles, a few even arriving on foot, moving with that characteristic inhuman grace. All of them were beautiful in that uncanny way, all pale and perfect and dangerous. They gathered in what Serafina called the throne room, a massive hall on the first floor that Lydia hadn't been shown before. She could hear voices rising and falling, arguments and proclamations in multiple languages. At the center of it all was Castellan, his voice cutting through the chaos with absolute authority. "Lord Malachi has broken our laws," she heard him say, his words carrying up the stairs with supernatural clarity. "He entered my territory without permission. He created vampires without oversight. He attacked my home and threatened one under my protection. This cannot stand." A chorus of agreement, some enthusiastic, some reluctant. "We go to war at dawn tomorrow," Castellan continued. "Every vampire in this room will participate or be considered an enemy of this court. We will find Malachi and his clan, and we will eliminate them completely. Am I understood?" A roar of assent that made the windows rattle. Lydia shivered, both frightened and awed by the display of power. This was what Castellan truly was beneath the cultured exterior. This was the king who'd ruled for 3 centuries, who'd survived countless challenges, who commanded loyalty through a combination of strength and will. And he'd promised to protect her. This ancient, powerful, dangerous being had looked at her and decided she was worth going to war for. The meeting broke up eventually, vampires streaming back out into the night. Lydia watched them go, then turned to find Castellan standing in her doorway. She hadn't heard him approach. "Did I frighten you?" he asked quietly. "A little," she admitted, "but not in a bad way. More like awe, maybe? You're incredible when you're being kingly. I'm still me." "I know. That's what makes it incredible." Lydia moved toward him. "When do you leave?" "A few hours before dawn. We'll attack while the sun is rising, when they're at their weakest." "Will you be weakened too?" "Yes, but I'm older, stronger. I can withstand the sun's effects longer than most." He took her hands. "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If anything goes wrong, if somehow they get past us and come here again, you run. You take the car keys Serafina will give you, and you drive as far and as fast as you can. Don't look back. Castellan. Promise me, Lydia. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. I promise. Thank you. He pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the slow, unnecessary beat of his heart. I wish we'd had more time before all this. We'll have time after. You're going to win. You sound certain. I am. You're the oldest, strongest vampire in North America. You have an army and home field advantage, and you're fighting for something personal, which means you won't hold back. Lydia looked up at him. They don't stand a chance. He smiled, and it was fierce and beautiful. I think you might be my good luck charm. That's very superstitious for a 700-year-old vampire king. I've been alive long enough to believe in luck, and magic, and fate. He kissed her forehead. You should rest. Tomorrow will be difficult, even if everything goes according to plan. Will you stay with me? Until you have to leave? Yes. They lay together on the bed, Castellan's cool body against her warm one, talking in low voices about nothing and everything. He told her about his human life, growing up in medieval England as the son of a minor lord. He told her about the vampire who'd transformed him, about the decades of confusion and violence that followed. He told her about building his territory, earning respect through a combination of strength and fair governance. Lydia told him about her boring childhood in suburban Connecticut, her degree in marketing that she'd never really wanted, the series of increasingly unsatisfying jobs and relationships that had led her to Marcus. She told him about always feeling like she was performing a role rather than living a life. And now? He asked. Now I feel alive. Terrified and probably insane, but alive. Good. He brushed her hair back from her face. You deserve to feel alive, Lydia Johnson. You deserve to burn as brightly as you want. She fell asleep like that, cocooned in his arms, safe despite the impending violence. When she woke, hours later, he was gone. But a note lay on the pillow where his head had been. I will return to you. This is not how our story ends. C. The waiting was agony. Serafina kept her company, trying to distract her with books and food and conversation, but Lydia couldn't focus on anything except the clock. Dawn came and went. Morning stretched into afternoon. Every minute that passed without word felt like an eternity. Finally, as the sun was beginning to set again, Isolde appeared in the doorway of the library where Lydia had been pretending to read. The vampire looked exhausted, but triumphant. It's over, she said. We won. Relief hit Lydia so hard she nearly collapsed. Castellan. Injured but alive. He's downstairs demanding to see you. Lydia ran, probably not the dignified response, but she didn't care. She found him in the main hall, surrounded by court members, his white shirt torn and stained with blood. He looked up when she entered, and his entire expression softened. Lydia. She launched herself at him, and he caught her easily, spinning her around despite his injuries. You're okay. You came back. I promised, didn't I? He set her down gently. It's done. Malachi and his inner circle are dead. The rest of his clan has been scattered or integrated into ours. You're safe now. What about you? You're hurt. I'll heal. Vampire constitution. But he silenced her with a kiss, deep and claiming, and she heard several of the court members laugh or whistle. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing with that inhuman light again. I have an announcement, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Lydia Johnson is under my permanent protection. She is to be treated as court royalty, with all the respect and privilege that entails. Anyone who harms her answers to me personally. Is that understood? A chorus of agreement from the assembled vampires. Furthermore, Castellan continued, and now he was looking only at Lydia, I intend to court her properly, to give her the time and attention and romance she deserves, free from the threat of violence or political manipulation. And should she accept me, I will make her my queen. Stunned silence. Then Isolde started clapping, and others joined in until the entire hall was filled with applause. Lydia's head was spinning. Queen? Castellan, I'm human. I don't know anything about vampire politics. You don't have to decide now. You don't have to decide ever if you don't want to. But I needed everyone here to know that you're mine, and I'm yours, and no force in heaven or hell is going to change that." He took her hand. "Is that okay?" Lydia looked around at the dozens of vampires watching her, these ancient, powerful creatures treating her with respect because their king had claimed her. She thought about her old life, the wedding that hadn't happened, the safe, predictable future she'd almost accepted. Then she looked at Castellan, at the vampire king who'd picked her up when she was drowning and protected her with everything he had, who'd gone to war for her, who was offering her a place in his world, his court, his life. "That's more than okay," she said. The weeks that followed were the strangest and most wonderful of Lydia's life. She moved into the mansion officially, filling her borrowed room with her own belongings once Serafina arranged for everything to be retrieved from her apartment. She avoided calls from her mother and Marcus, not ready to deal with that mess yet. She'd get there eventually, but for now, she was healing. Castellan courted her exactly as he'd promised. He took her to restaurants that catered to vampire clientele, where she was the only human and everyone treated her like royalty. He showed her the hidden parts of the city, the underground clubs and secret meeting places where vampires gathered. He taught her about vampire law and culture, patiently answering her endless questions. And slowly, carefully, they fell in love. It wasn't the comfortable, predictable relationship she'd had with Marcus. It was intense and passionate and occasionally frightening. Castellan was protective to the point of overbearing sometimes, and they had their first real fight when he tried to forbid her from leaving the mansion without a guard. "I'm not a prisoner," she'd snapped. "You're a target," he'd countered. "Word is spread that you're important to me. There are always those who would try to exploit that." "So I just stay locked up forever?" "No, you stay safe until I can be certain no one will harm you." They'd argued for an hour before reaching a compromise. She could go out, but with security, and she had to text him regularly so he knew she was okay. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. He told her more about his past, about the wife he'd lost and the centuries of loneliness that followed. "I thought I'd never feel that connection again," he admitted one night as they lay tangled together in his bed, her warmth against his coolness. "I'd resigned myself to duty without joy. And then you stumbled into my car in that ridiculous dress and everything changed." "It wasn't ridiculous. It cost $6,000. It was absurd. You looked like a cake topper come to life." She swatted his chest. "You said I looked lovely." "You did. You looked lovely and ridiculous simultaneously. It's a rare gift." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I'm glad you ran from that wedding, Lydia. I'm glad you chose yourself. I'm glad fate or luck or whatever cosmic force exists decided to put you in my path." "Me too," she whispered. 3 months after that first night, Castellan took her to a private garden on the mansion grounds that she hadn't known existed. It was beautiful even in winter, with carefully maintained topiaries and a fountain that burbled softly. He'd filled it with candles, hundreds of them, their light making everything look like a dream. "Lydia Johnson," he said, taking her hands. "I'm 743 years old. I've ruled territories and fought wars. I've accumulated wealth and power and influence, but none of it meant anything until I met you. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever: hope, joy, a reason to exist beyond mere duty." "Castellan, let me finish." His pale eyes were intense. "I know you're young by vampire standards. I know asking you to commit to an immortal is complicated. But I'm not asking you to decide today. I'm simply asking if you'll consider spending your life with me, however long or short that life may be. And if you want more than a human lifespan, if you want to walk beside me through centuries instead of decades, I will arrange for your transformation when you're ready. Not now, not until you're absolutely certain, but someday, if you want it." Lydia's throat was tight with emotion. "You'd do that? Turn me into a vampire?" "I'd do anything for you. Anything you asked. I'd walk into the sun if you needed me to, but I'd prefer to spend eternity with you instead, if you'll have me." She thought about her old life, the one she'd left behind. Thought about Marcus and the wedding and the future she'd almost accepted. It seemed like it belonged to someone else now, a different Lydia who hadn't known what she was capable of. This Lydia, the one standing in a candlelit garden with a vampire king offering her forever, knew exactly what she wanted. Yes, she said. Yes to all of it. Yes to spending my life with you. Yes to eventually becoming a vampire, when I'm ready. Yes to being your queen and partner and whatever else you need me to be. Just yes. Castellan kissed her, and it was soft and desperate and full of promise. When they broke apart, he pulled a ring from his pocket, a band of white gold set with a dark ruby that seemed to glow with inner fire. "This was my mother's," he said, slipping it onto her finger. "It's been in my family for 900 years. And now it's yours." Lydia looked at the ring, then at him, and started laughing through her tears. "I'm engaged again. I've been single for 3 months, and I'm already engaged again. Is that a problem? No, it's perfect. It's absurd and perfect, and I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too, more than I thought possible, more than I have words to express." He pulled her close. "We'll do this right. A proper engagement, a proper wedding when you're ready. No rushing, no pressure, just us building a life together. A very long life, the longest I can give you." They stood there in the garden, surrounded by candlelight and possibility, and Lydia felt something settle in her chest, peace, certainty, the bone-deep knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 1 year later, she married Castellan in that same garden, wearing a dress that was elegant and simple, and nothing like the monstrosity from her first attempted wedding. The ceremony was attended by vampires from across the continent, all of them curious to meet the human who'd captured their king's heart. Theron officiated, reading from an ancient text about the bonds between souls that transcended death itself. Isolde and Serafina stood as witnesses, and when Castellan slipped another ring onto her finger, this one a matching band to his own, Lydia felt the full weight of what they were promising each other. "Forever," he murmured. "Forever," she agreed. The reception was magnificent, held in the mansion's grand ballroom with music and dancing, and blood served in crystal glasses for the vampire guests. Lydia danced with her new husband, with his court members, with vampires who treated her with a respect and affection she'd never expected. Late in the night, Castellan pulled her aside. "Are you happy?" Deliriously. "No regrets about your old life?" "None. Well, maybe one?" His expression grew concerned. "What?" "I kind of wish I could see Marcus's face if he found out I married a vampire king. The petty part of me wants him to know I upgraded significantly." Castellan laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "You're terrible. You love it." "I love you." He kissed her softly. "Ready to start our forever?" "I've been ready since the moment I got in your car." They spent the next 2 years traveling, Castellan showing her the world through vampire eyes. They visited his other residences, met with other courts, navigated the complex politics of vampire society. Lydia learned quickly, her natural intelligence and empathy making her unexpectedly good at diplomatic negotiations. She also learned to fight, training with Isolde until she could defend herself against threats both human and supernatural. She'd never be as strong as a vampire, but she could hold her own, and that was enough. On their 2nd anniversary, Lydia told Castellan she was ready. "Ready for what?" he asked, though she could see in his eyes that he knew. "To transform. To become like you. To stop being the fragile human who needs protecting and start being your true partner in all things." "Lydia, you're already my true partner. Your humanity doesn't diminish that." "I know. But I want this. I want centuries with you, not decades. I want to see the world change and grow old together in a way that doesn't involve me dying while you stay frozen in time. I want forever, Castellan. Real forever." He studied her for a long moment. "You're certain? The transformation is painful, dangerous. Not everyone survives it. I'll survive it, and you'll be there with me. Always." The transformation happened on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. Castellan arranged everything carefully, bringing in healers and experts, ensuring they had the best possible conditions. Lydia lay on their bed, her husband beside her, and let him bite her neck. The pain was extraordinary. She'd expected it to hurt, but not like this, not like every cell in her body was being torn apart and rebuilt. She screamed until her voice gave out, her back arching off the bed, her hands clutching Castellan's with desperate strength. "I'm here," he murmured over and over. "I'm here, beloved. You're doing so well. Just hold on for me." She held on, through the pain, through the fear, through the moment where she was sure she was dying. And then, slowly, the agony began to fade. Her heartbeat slowed, then stopped entirely. Her breathing became unnecessary. The world shifted, colors becoming sharper, sounds clearer, every sense heightening to supernatural levels. When she opened her eyes, she could see in the darkness as clearly as if it were noon. She could hear conversations happening 3 floors away. She could smell blood, Castellan's and her own, and the scent was intoxicating rather than revolting. "How do you feel?" Castellan asked, his face hovering above hers. Lydia took stock. She felt strong, powerful, alive in a way she'd never experienced as a human. "I feel incredible. Look." He handed her a mirror, and Lydia gasped at her reflection. Her skin had gone pale, though not as translucent as Castellan's. Her eyes had changed. The brown now shot through with threads of gold. Her hair had lightened slightly, taking on platinum undertones. She looked like a vampire. She looked like a queen. "You're beautiful," Castellan whispered. "You were always beautiful, but now you're magnificent." "I'm like you now. Truly like you." "Yes. My equal in all ways." He pulled her close. "Welcome to forever, Lydia Draconis." She kissed him, tasting blood on his lips, and felt something click into place. This was what she'd been meant for. Not the safe, predictable life, not the conventional marriage to a conventional man. This wild, impossible, dangerous love with a creature who'd survived centuries and chosen to give his heart to her. The years that followed were everything she'd dreamed and more. As a vampire, Lydia came into her own power. She learned to move with inhuman speed, to fight with supernatural strength. She took her place at Castellan's side, not as decoration, but as true co-ruler, her insights and intelligence shaping policy and resolving disputes. Together, they transformed the North American territory. They established better protections for humans who knew about vampires, created programs to help newly turned vampires adjust, opened diplomatic channels with other supernatural communities. Under their joint rule, the territory flourished. But more than the politics or the power, what mattered was the love. They'd found each other against all odds, a lonely king and a runaway bride, and built something that transcended time itself. They laughed together, fought together, grew together through decades that became centuries. On their 50th wedding anniversary, Lydia looked at her husband and marveled that she'd almost married someone else, almost settled for comfortable instead of extraordinary, almost missed out on this incredible, impossible life. "What are you thinking?" Castellan asked, pulling her onto his lap in the library where they'd spent so many hours. "I'm thinking about fate, about how one decision changed everything. If I hadn't run from that wedding, if I hadn't gotten in your car, none of this would have happened." "Do you regret it? Ever?" "Not even for a second." She kissed him softly. "You're my forever, Castellan Draconis, my king, my partner, my love. And I'd choose you again in every lifetime. And I'd pick you up again in every lifetime, the bride in the ridiculous dress who stole my heart without trying." They sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by centuries of history and the promise of centuries more to come. Outside, the world continued to change and evolve, but inside their mansion, their home, time seemed to slow. This was what happy endings looked like, Lydia realized. Not the fairy tale wedding with 300 guests, not the conventional marriage to the safe choice. But this. 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds, who'd chosen each other every day for half a century, and would continue choosing each other for eternity. She'd hitched a ride still in her wedding dress, not knowing the driver was a lonely vampire king. And in doing so, she'd found not just safety or rescue, but her true home, her true self, her true love. Everything that came before had been prologue. Everything that came after would be their story, written together in the dark and the light, through centuries of change and challenge and unwavering devotion. And it was perfect. Years turned into decades, decades into centuries, but the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deeper, more complex with the passage of time. They weathered political upheavals and territory disputes. They saw human civilization advance in ways neither could have imagined. They made friends among both vampires and humans, creating a court that was renowned for its wisdom and fairness. But at the end of every night, it was just the two of them, Lydia and Castellan, the vampire king and his queen. Two souls who'd found each other when they'd both needed it most, and built something that would outlast empires. "Do you ever miss being human?" Castellan asked her once during their second century together. Lydia considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity, the limited perspective. But no, I don't regret the choice. Being with you for centuries is worth any price. Even when I'm overbearing and protective? Especially then. It means you care. I more than care, beloved. I treasure you. I worship you. Every night I wake up grateful that fate brought you to me." "Fate or coincidence or dumb luck," Lydia said, smiling. "Whatever it was, I'm grateful too." They'd built an empire together, but more importantly, they'd built a partnership, a marriage, a love that transcended death itself. And as they faced their third century together, Lydia knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. That day she'd run from her wedding. Sometimes the worst days of our lives are actually doorways to the best ones. Sometimes falling apart is how we fall into place. And sometimes the person who saves us is the one we didn't know we were looking for. Lydia had hitched a ride in a wedding dress, desperate and broken and running from a life that didn't fit. She'd been picked up by a vampire king who was just as lonely and lost as she was, even if he hid it better. Together, they'd found their way home, and they had forever to enjoy it. In the mansion that had become truly theirs, in the territory they ruled with wisdom and strength, in the love they'd built from chance encounter and choosing each other every single day, Lydia and Castellan lived their happily ever after. Not perfect, because nothing ever is, not without challenges, because growth requires struggle, but happy, fulfilled, complete. And that, after everything, was more than enough. It was everything.